In the windswept heart of ancient Central Asia, where endless steppes met jagged mountains that sliced the sky, one woman carved her name into the annals of history, not just with courage, not just with fire, but with blood, the blood of the most powerful man on earth. This is the story of Tomyris, queen of the Massagete, the woman who avenged her son with a vengeance so devastating, it shook the very core of an empire. To understand her wrath, we must first understand the man who earned it, Cyrus the Great. Back in the 6th century BCE, while Rome was still a collection of huts and Athens toyed with the idea of democracy, a titan of an empire was rising in the east. The Persian Empire, ruled by Cyrus II, stretched from the Mediterranean Sea to the Hindu Kush, from the Caucasus Mountains down to the Persian Gulf. No human being had ever ruled over so vast a domain. But Cyrus wasn't just another conqueror. He was a pioneer, a reformer in the realm of empire building. Unlike the despots who came before him, Cyrus allowed the people he conquered to keep their customs, religions, even their local rulers. When he took Babylon, he didn't burn it to the ground. Instead, he freed the Jewish captives and let them return home. His policies were immortalized in the Cyrus Cylinder, a clay decree that some today call the world's first declaration of human rights. But don't be fooled by this image of kindness. Cyrus's tolerance wasn't born from compassion. It was cold, calculated brilliance. Respecting local traditions made his empire easier to manage. Appearing as a liberator gave him power without resistance. Beneath the mask of mercy lay boundless ambition. And he wasn't finished. Every triumph only whetted his hunger for more. In 530 BCE, after subjugating ancient kingdoms, Cyrus set his sights on the lands beyond the Jaxartes River, what we now call the CHRONICLES. There, in the wilds of Central Asia, lived the Massagete, fierce, nomadic warriors who roamed the steppes without walls or cities. The sky was their ceiling, the horizon, their boundary, and ruling them was a widowed queen who would teach Cyrus a lesson carved in blood, Tomyris. We know little of Tomyris's early life. History, after all, was mostly written by men who rarely paused to document the childhoods of women, even queens. But what we do know is that after her husband's death, Tomyris didn't fade into ceremonial obscurity. She stepped up and ruled, and not just in name. Tomyris wasn't a figurehead or a placeholder. She commanded armies. She earned the respect of her people not through birthright or marriage, but through sheer merit. She was a queen of warriors, by choice and by blood. When Persian envoys arrived at her nomadic court, they brought a seemingly generous offer. Cyrus, the mighty king, proposed marriage. On paper, it made sense. Tomyris would retain her crown, and her people would be folded into the Persian Empire without war. It would be a bloodless conquest dressed as a royal union. But Tomyris wasn't naive. She saw the proposal for what it truly was, not an offer of partnership, but a veiled attempt at domination. She refused, politely perhaps, but firmly. The Massagete would remain free, and she would be neither bride nor subject to the Persian king. To Cyrus, the rejection was unbearable. He had conquered cities that had stood for centuries. He had toppled dynasties. To be denied, by a nomadic queen no less, felt like an insult he couldn't abide. If diplomacy had failed, then force would do. Cyrus summoned a mighty army. His sights were now locked on the steppes of the Massagete. But Tomyris was ready. When word of his coming reached her, she didn't flinch. She sent a messenger with a warning that should have given even Cyrus pause. king of the Persians, abandon this quest. You do not know if it will profit you. Rule your own people. Let me rule mine. But I know you will not heed my words, for peace is not in your nature." Her words, though powerful, were cast aside. Cyrus pressed on. He led his forces across the Jaxartes, building bridges to cross into the Queen's lands. But Tomyris didn't rush to defend the riverbanks. She let him cross. Let him enter a world he didn't understand, a vast, merciless landscape where she held every advantage. And that's when Cyrus made his first fatal mistake. He underestimated his enemy. Following the advice of Croesus, the once king of Lydia, now a royal advisor, Cyrus concocted a trap. He believed the Massagetae had a weakness, their unfamiliarity with wine. So he laid bait. He ordered a Persian camp to be filled with food, supplies, and, most importantly, copious amounts of wine. He left only a token guard and then staged a retreat. The plan? Let the nomads attack the abandoned camp. Let them eat. Let them drink. And when they were drunk, strike. It worked. At first, a group of Massagetae warriors, led by Tomyris' own son, Spargapises, stumbled upon the camp. They overwhelmed the guards easily, but then they drank the wine, and drank, and drank. These steppe warriors had never known alcohol like this, and it overpowered them. In the dead of night, Cyrus returned with his forces. The Massagetae, too intoxicated to fight, were cut down. Many died. The rest, including Spargapises, were taken prisoner. When the boy sobered and saw what had happened, how he had fallen for a ruse and led his men to ruin, he begged to be released. And once granted his freedom, in a final act of shame and honor, he took his own life. The news hit Tomyris like a thunderclap. Her son, dead, not fallen in battle but deceived, slain not by might, but by trickery. Her grief was immeasurable, but she didn't break. She burned. She sent a second message to Cyrus. This time her fury was unmasked. "Bloodthirsty man, do not pride yourself on this. You conquered my son not with valor, but with wine, the poison that drives men to madness. Leave my lands now, and I will forgive this treachery. If not, I swear by the sun, Lord of the Massagetae, I will give you all the blood you thirst for." Cyrus didn't listen. He couldn't. The man who had taken Babylon, crushed Lydia, and set Egypt in his sights would not back down from a queen of the wilds. He believed this would be just another feather in his imperial crown. He could not have been more wrong. Tomyris knew that Cyrus would not retreat. So she gathered her people, not just her own warriors, but every Massagetae tribe across the steppes. Mounted fighters, forged by wind and hardship, rallied to her cause. These were no ordinary soldiers. They were born in the saddle, trained to ride for days without rest, to strike from impossible distances with deadly accuracy. They were the heartbeat of the steppe, and they were ready for war. The stage was set. Cyrus, confident and determined, brought his army deeper into unfamiliar terrain. His forces were formidable: well-drilled infantry, elite cavalry, siege engineers, archers, but all their discipline and armor couldn't prepare them for what was coming. The final clash came swiftly. In the vast openness of the plains, Persian tactics, designed for sieges and urban warfare, began to break down. Their heavy infantry couldn't adapt to the speed and mobility of the steppe warriors. Tomyris' forces moved like shadows. They struck fast, vanished faster. Arrows rained from horseback in deadly arcs. Persian lines crumbled under the relentless assault. And still, Cyrus fought on. The great king, now in the thick of battle, led from the front. He had built his empire by the sword, and he intended to defend it by the same. But no amount of personal bravery could change the tide. The land was not his. The warriors did not fear him, and the woman he had wronged fought not for conquest, but for vengeance. And then it happened. In the chaos of battle, Cyrus the Great fell. The man who had built the largest empire the world had yet seen, the king whose name echoed across continents, was killed. His death sent a shiver through history, but it wasn't his fall in combat that cemented the tale. It was what came after. According to Herodotus, the father of Western history, Tomyris ordered her warriors to scour the battlefield. Find him. Find the body of the man who took her son. When they did, she gave one final command: cut off his head. The next moment would become legend. Tomyris took a wineskin, one once used to carry drink, and filled it with human blood. Then, holding Cyrus's severed head by the hair, she plunged it into the bag. And she spoke, "I have conquered you in battle, and you have destroyed me by taking my son. Now, as I promised, I will quench your thirst for blood." It was brutal, but it wasn't just rage. It was symbolism, raw, unforgettable, chilling. This wasn't senseless cruelty. This was a declaration, a warning, a moment carved into memory with all the force of a mother's grief and a queen's wrath. The man who had spilled oceans of blood now drowned in it, his head submerged in the very substance he'd so endlessly pursued. But was it real? That's the question history always circles back to. Herodotus wrote his account some 75 years after the battle, relying heavily on oral traditions. He was Greek, and the Greeks, enemies of the Persians, had reasons to amplify stories of their downfall. We do know that Cyrus died in a campaign against a northern tribe, likely the Massagetae. Persian records confirm this, and later inscriptions mention his burial in Pasargadae, his capital, implying that his body was recovered. That part contradicts the tale of his decapitation. Some historians argue that the story was exaggerated, crafted by Greek storytellers to humiliate the mighty Persians. After all, the idea of a barbarian queen defeating the world's greatest king was irresistible. It reversed the power dynamic. It fed the Greek imagination. But other sources back the story up. The Roman historian Justin echoed the tale, describing Tomyris not as a passive queen defending her home, but as a warrior avenging her realm. And archaeological evidence confirms the existence of the Massagetae, a fierce confederation of nomadic tribes who posed a genuine threat to Persian power. Still, what followed Cyrus's death is less contested. His son, Cambyses II, took the throne, but he lacked his father's finesse. While he did manage to conquer Egypt, the internal balance of the empire began to waver. Cambyses ruled with less wisdom, more brute force. After his death, civil war broke out. Chaos followed, until Darius I eventually restored order and pushed the empire to new heights. And Tomyris? Her fate is cloaked in silence. Like so many powerful women of ancient history, her story fades after the climax. Records of her later life are sparse. Some say she ruled in peace for years, untouched by further invasions. Others suggest she was eventually defeated by rival tribes. But none of it is certain. What we do know, what cannot be denied, is the legacy she left behind. In a world where women were so often footnotes in the stories of kings and generals, Tomyris became the story. She didn't ride beside a man. She didn't serve as a political tool. She didn't rule in anyone's name. She fought. She led. She avenged. Tomyris's victory was more than a military triumph. It was a statement that power can emerge from the margins, that even a so-called barbarian woman could outmatch the greatest empire on earth. That vengeance, when forged from pain and precision, can topple a titan. Tomyris's triumph was more than a historical event. It was a disruption of everything her enemies believed to be true. She shattered expectations not just of gender, but of civilization itself. To the Greeks and Persians, the Persian Empire represented order, cities, roads, palaces, laws. It was what they considered civilized. The Massagetae, by contrast, lived in tents. They followed herds, not rulers. They had no stone cities, no towering walls. They were nomads, labeled as barbarians. And yet it was the so-called barbarian who prevailed. This ancient confrontation between the mobile and the settled, between empire and tribe, is a theme that would repeat across history. The Huns against Rome, the Mongols against China. The same pattern again and again. Powerful empires falling to swift, underestimated warriors from the steppes. But Tomyris was more than just a representative of that pattern. She stood apart. Most of those legendary steppe conquerors, Attila, Genghis Khan, Tamerlane, were men whose names echoed through time. Tomyris's name, despite her staggering victory, nearly vanished. No empire traces its lineage to her. No city bears her name. No colossal monument marks her grave. And yet, her legacy persists. Her story traveled across centuries, kept alive by historians and storytellers who couldn't ignore the gravity of what she did. To this day, the image of Cyrus's head plunged into a skin of blood stands as one of the most haunting scenes in ancient lore. It isn't just gruesome, it's poetic. It reminds us that ambition has its cost, that power, even when dressed in gold and carved into stone, can be undone by a single miscalculation. By a woman most had dismissed, by grief channeled into strategy. In a way, Tomyris didn't just kill Cyrus, she transformed him, from an invincible emperor to a cautionary tale, from a godlike figure to a mortal man brought low by his own hubris. And what she gave the world, perhaps without meaning to, was a symbol. A severed head in a bag of blood, not as a trophy, not as a horror, but as a mirror. A mirror for every empire, every king, every conqueror who ever believed they were too great to fall. Because Tomyris proved that no one is beyond reach, that greatness built on domination can be undone by resistance born of pain, that the fury of a mother, the resolve of a queen, and the sharpness of a sword can reshape the world. And perhaps that's why her story still echoes today. Not because she ruled long, not because she built temples or left behind scrolls, but because she did what no one expected. She stood her ground. She mourned her son. She fought, and she won. In the windswept plains of Central Asia, where the horses of the Massagetae once galloped freely, the sky is still endless. The wind still howls. There are no ruins of her kingdom, no statues cast in her image. But legends don't need monuments. They just need to be told. And so we remember Tomyris, not as a footnote in the history of empires, but as a force that changed it. A woman who refused to bow. A queen who faced down the greatest conqueror of her age and didn't just survive. She made sure he didn't.